Hi, Kate.
Hey, Ananya.
Hi. So I had a question. So I heard that we, Public Service International, we're collaborating with the Citizen News Service for the Women Deliver conference that's happening in Melbourne. Is that right? What's that about?
Yeah, so it's an interesting collaboration. We've decided with Women Deliver being held in Melbourne, where we have our regional office, that it's a good idea to come together with some progressive media organisations and have a bit of a trade union voice in a space that otherwise wouldn't generally have trade unions. We will be there also as a member of the Global Care Alliance, and we're going to be profiling the campaign work on community health work is work, because that's a missing link, obviously, from some of the feminist movements. But it's an unusual decision. I think it's our first time, at least for me, to participate in Women Deliver, because it's not an intergovernmental meeting. And so it doesn't set standards. We're used to being, and as trade unions, we're used to having a lot more voice and a lot more power in these kind of meetings. Because, of course, in the International Labour Organisation, we are part of the governance. We vote, we set standards, and we hold governments to account through that method. And hold employers to account, although they have also a vote. So this is a bit different. It's a bit of a gathering without a defined outcome, but we've decided to try and have a presence in any case to bring some of our message to the global feminist movement that attends.
Well, that's great. I realize that there is quite a lot that's going to be happening at the conference. But I was wondering, so you were talking about the ILO, but a global platform like this, what do you think? What opportunities does it present for the trade union movement?
Well, there's not many formal opportunities. It's there, but because I think the agenda is very well orchestrated, and it's mainly, I guess, donors and leading feminist thinkers. And although it's a very large gathering, perhaps there is a need for this sort of gathering, given that in the world at the moment there's a strong backlash against women's rights and feminist movements. And of course, we know that billionaires have a lot of gathering opportunities, and they really can come together both at the well-known venues like the World Economic Forum, but also at some of their more covert meetings to craft the world they want. And they've really achieved that by being able to have billionaires influence policy making around the world. So it is important to have these moments, but there is a bit of a concern that some of these meetings can replicate a bit of the billionaire class gatherings by being very expensive, by, only having visa problems. Australia's not an easy place for certainly most trade unionists or workers to get a visa. It might be easier for people that travel a lot around the world, but not for the workers we represent. So it does have some flaws in that I think the voice of privileged people is probably elevated much above the working class. But at the same time, we think we do need to have a presence there, given the situation in the world with so many threats to workers and also to women's rights, that it's worth having a trade union presence.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with that. And talking about the link between women's rights and trade unions and the working class, well, there is a bit of history there in the place that it's happening, right? Could you share some of that with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the factors that at PSI we really have tried to highlight in the really progressive work we do on women's rights and feminist analysis of particularly of the way that care has been corporatized and that social protection is so critical to advancing women's rights, but also to the work we've done on LGBTQI rights, on Indigenous rights, on trying to be as inclusive as possible. We do draw on progressive trade union histories that have shown that the way to achieve change is through trade union power and, quite frankly, through disruption. We haven't gained the things we've gained through quiet advocacy, through just requesting changes to law, or through deep analysis. It's really been through our capacity to join analysis with action. And in Melbourne, one of the interesting parts of its history is that we have, first of all, the oldest continuously operating trade union building in the world that celebrates its history, both feminist history and labour history, of being the first place in the world to achieve the 8-hour day.
Wow.
Yeah, that have the 888 framework, which is going back now about 170 years.
Wow.
Also the first place in the world to achieve a living wage. It was a sexist living wage at the time, setting a wage for men and assuming women were dependents, but it established a living wage as a principle. That more recently we've been one of the first places in the world or leading in the world on pay equity, to give increases to workers in the care sector who, through a process of recognising the devaluation of women's work, not through a male comparator, but through recognising that historically work that is majority of women in care has been devalued because it's delivered by women. So that's a really critical achievement, and some of the work we've done in PSI, but has been done particularly by trade unions in Melbourne or its state of Victoria, on things like looking at the reproductive rights of women through their whole life cycle. Of course, we're all familiar with work on parental leave or maternity leave. This extends that to looking at other issues through the life cycle that women and non-binary people and men might need in their life, their reproductive life, whether that be about using IVF, whether that be about menstrual leave, whether that be about menopausal leave. So those sorts of things have been important to achieve in the work that unions have done that complement the feminist movement.
Well, that sounds incredible. And I'm really hoping and looking forward to the conference now. Let's see where and how we can really, the feminist movement and the labor movement can really come together to build the power of workers and, get some disruption done.
Yeah, I think that this is one of our main problems, of course, is that how do we use the power we have? And I think the conference itself won't address that. I don't think I see anything on the agenda that looks at how we can collaboratively build enough power that addresses the global problems. I think there's some important moments to talk about local movements that have built power, but we have a challenge ahead of ourselves right now that where an unprecedented monopolisation of power is occurring in the hands of a tiny minority, whether that be big tech and the billionaires and the governments that serve them. Of course, we know the US government, but many other governments as well, are failing to respond to the needs of working class people. Yeah. So one thing perhaps at this conference that might not happen in the plenary, but could possibly happen in the sidelines, are those discussions around how can we actually think of the practical ways to disrupt global power through alliance building. That isn't really just about speaking opportunities or even strong analysis, but really does think about the level of solidarity that's required to achieve system change.
Great. So, well, thanks for talking to me.
You're welcome anytime.